Whoa, hey. Yeah, so here I am. It's late at night, sort of kind of late at night. It's been a long day. The light's doing this weird thing about turning on, turning off. You see that it's doing that. Um, so I got some stuff I want to talk about today. Other than me staying busy, working in the yard. Like I said, it's nighttime. But the thing I want to talk about is something that's near and dear, I think, to all of us. I mean, you like dogs, right? Cats, pets, animals. I mean, I do. They're more than just they're more than just a pet or an animal thing. They're really part of the family. At least that's how I view my dog. And I kind of hate saying my dog. You know, he's my pal. He's my boy. He's my buddy. I'm sure that that's how you feel about your pet, your animal, whether it's a cat or dog, hamster, gerbil, whatever it might be. And there are those people who just, I don't know, they just look at them as animals. Kind of pisses me off. Yep, I said that. But anyhow, today we're going to talk about losing a pet, losing your pal. So my guest is Jean Alfieri, and she is the author of a couple of books on pets, but the one that we're talking about today is 21 Ways to Weather the Loss of Your Pet. I mean, there is a grieving process when we go through losing a dog. I've lost dogs in the past, and I'm a dog person more than I am a cat person, but I do like cats as well. But like I said, I like dogs, and there is a huge difference between the responsibility of having or owning a dog versus a cat. At least I think so, and from what I have seen, because cats, they can care less. They can do whatever they want. You just put some food in the bowl, they get the food. A dog is like a 2-year-old for its entire life. You've got to love it. You've got to hold it. You got to pay attention. You got to feed it. You got to clean it. You got to do all that stuff. So if you know where I'm coming from, I think this podcast is going to hit home for you. So please listen, leave some comments, and let's get right into the show. After I remind you, if you are a responsible pet owner, please remember to have your pets spayed or neutered. All right, let's get into the show. We're going to talk about your new book, but I also want to really talk about dogs, whether it be just dogs or cats, but our four-legged furry pals, because
Yes.
I have a beef to pick with a lot of people out there, and I hope you support me in that. And one of the things, Gene, is what we were just saying is about spaying and neutering your pets.
Yes.
So
It is the responsible pet parent thing to do. There are so many animals out there needing and deserving a home that we don't need to multiply that. That's not what the earth needs. We need to be conscientious about that. Absolutely.
yeah, Gene, I want to ask, how do we pronounce your last name?
It's Alfieri.
Alfieri. Yeah,
Yes.
just the way it's kind of spelled and looks,
Exactly. Yes.
Gene Alfieri.
Yes.
Uh, so like I said, we want to talk about your book, and forgive me, I put all my notes on the other
Of
platform.
course.
So I'm gonna ask you to give the title of your book where
Sure.
people can reach out. We'll get that right out of the way, and then we're gonna jump into what everybody loves, or everybody says they love, and that's dogs. I'm a more of a dog fan, but we're generalize and say this is for your four-legged furry pals, but we'll be referencing this to dogs.
Right, right. So the title of my book is 21 Ways to Weather the Loss of Your Pet. And it is designed to be an idea guide to grieving and healing the passing of a pet, dog, cat, bunny, exotic, whatever it may be. It's all about that connection that we make and healing through losing that connection.
Yeah, and a lot of us will say, and we do feel that we wish our pets would last, our dogs would live as long as we would or that we could. And I think that to me is key, which means that love your dog to the fullest till its end.
Right, right. Absolutely. Yeah, life is brief, and I think that's one of the lessons they teach us is that, and they're so unconditional, right? They're so unconditional about their love, which is what makes it most heartbreaking. And you consider the family dynamic, everybody's impacted in some way when one leaves, and so it's really important to consider where they fit in your life and how you can spend the time with them that you can while you can.
Yeah, and they are very important. I mean, you look around anywhere around the world, from country to country, and there is an homage, a statue, or something toward to a dog. I just saw one this morning for Barcelona,
Yeah.
and then of course the dog in Japan. We have the movie that starred, I think, Richard Gere. It may have been based on the dog from Japan. Um,
Our terms have changed over the years, right? Now we're fur parents and there are fur babies and what have you. I don't know that that's necessarily apropos either, but yes, and when you talk about famous dogs, right? There's that World War II dog that was honored by our military for his service, her service in
yeah,
protecting our troops overseas. So there's so many great stories about dogs and cats and all sorts of
yeah,
pets.
yeah. And again, the loss is so uh, tragic.
Right.
It's heartfelt, deep felt, because I think you feel it's a different loss. This may sound bad, and some people may get on my case about it, but it is a different loss of a feeling when you lose your your four-legged friend compared to a human.
It
There's
is, and
just a
I'll
different feeling.
yes, and I'll offer this in researching basically information and researching for this topic, because I came at it from a very different perspective. I consider myself a subject matter expert because we have had decades of older dogs in our house. My husband and I love to adopt senior dogs. We call them vintage puppies. We joke that if they don't need arthritis medicine, we're not interested in them. So we've gone through this for some time. But in doing research, I also learned in becoming a grief coach for pet loss. It's a thing, who knew? It is very unique, that loss. And specifically because our culture doesn't acknowledge pet loss as a true loss. It isn't considered viable, which is very sad to me. But the reason behind that is twofold. And they're both very offensive, Chuck. So stay seated here. First, they are just an animal. So that's the first thing that considers it a non-loss, and you can get another one. Well, anyone who's had a pet know that neither of those points are true, right? That's not valid. They're not just an animal, and you can't just simply replace them. So to grieve them, our culture has created a void, if you will, in acknowledging that grief being legitimate. And it's interesting because having worked at the Humane Society of the Pikes Peak region, I was instrumental, if you will, in helping define our bereavement policy such that we added another day. And how many organizations do you know that even
Wow.
recognize bereavement of a pet as a thing? So it kind of stands out, and I'm really proud of that's something that we offer. But you don't see that very frequently, and that's why it just isn't acknowledged as a true loss.
You're so right about that. Where I think so many people still, it's a throwaway thing. I'm going to get a dog because I'm lonely today.
Right.
Tomorrow, this is taking too much time. I'm going to go dump it off in the street and let it find its own way to wherever, or I'm going to take it to the shelter.
Yeah.
These are all the topics I'd like to really cover, as far as, like you said, the bereavement period that hopefully
Yeah.
companies will eventually give. At least a 24-hour would be nice if
Right.
somebody needs it, because it does affect you emotionally and mentally, and it can get in the way of your work or whatever you're doing.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to operate and do effective and efficient work when you're grieving. Certainly, there are many emotions that are stirred when a pet passes, and especially just going through the process, right? If that pet needs to be euthanized, that in itself is another layer that just contributes to our feeling guilty or bad about the situation, even when we know that this was the whole purpose behind it was so that the animal didn't suffer. So yes, there is a lot that goes through it, and to expect someone to rebound and just come back to work the next day is a stretch, to say the least.
Yeah, I've had human loss, close human loss, and I've had the loss of I call them my boys, my three boys. But I'll tell you what, my human loss, sure, I got a thing like this, but my furry pals, you open the front door, I've got all three and a 17 by 14 all lined up in the closet. So I see them when I open the door because
Yeah.
that's what I always saw. It was an unconditional love. I know that may sound crazy to some people, but it still gives me that comfort. Open the door, they're my boys. Sure,
Yes.
sometimes I say hi to them. I know they're
Yes.
not here, but they're in
Right.
my heart.
Right. Absolutely. And they'll always be in your heart. If, and I think you've heard this story before, but part of what inspired me to write this was visiting a second grade class. I'm a children's author, and I was visiting with them, and they had all sorts of great author questions, that I was well prepared for. And then a little boy raised his hand and said, "Have you ever had a dog that died?" And it just broke my heart because I had a dog that died, and I had a sense of what he was going through. And what I offered to him was at our table, at our dinner table, the night that a dog has passed, we always tell our favorite stories. We honor that dog in telling, and it's so fun to hear what everybody's favorite story is. And I asked him if he had a favorite story or something that he missed most about that dog. And what he said was that she was always waiting for him when he came home from school. So similar to what you're saying, when we walk in that door and there's that friendly face and body just waiting to be pet and loved, that is just, it's just hard. And so to see this child, 9 years old, grieving over this, I shared with him that as long as she's in your heart, she'll always, be with you. I asked the kids then if there was anyone else that had a favorite memory of their dog, and a few hands went up. And I asked them if at lunch they would share those memories with Joe, and so that Joe might feel better. And he nodded. I got to tell you, I didn't intend to set up a second grade therapy group that day. But in talking with the teacher, there's really a gap, and I feel like it's hard enough for us to handle this as adults, but to then help a child who's grieving, what is there someone who could be there after school for, a few days, a few weeks, just to greet him? It's just hard, where are those gaps? And we might not consider that for somebody else in the family. We know how it impacts us, but who else is being impacted by this, and in what way might they need help to get through it?
Yeah. Just to uh, put this out there, it may be a stretch, but this is how I personally feel. And I think the first loss a child goes through is a loss of their pet, whether it be a gerbil, a hamster, or a rabbit, a
Right.
cat or dog, whatever it is. And I personally think it's very important for the parent to take that time to say, this is a life, this is, something that you loved, this is going to happen. But just to let the child know what compassion is, and to let them know that this emotion, don't be angry, and
Right.
not to carry that through their entire life. When something happens, somebody dies, they're angry.
Right.
No, there was a life that was a gift. This is something unfortunate, or it was something that just, I don't want to say had to happen, but it just happened. And just remember the good times, cherish. Um, or if it's something
Absolutely.
of their fault, remember next time, don't do that, or whatever it may be.
Well, and the kids will see the parents and how they react too. So to be mindful of their own behavior, don't try to hide being sad from your kids. I mean,
Yeah.
they're going to know how you feel, and crying is okay. I mean, that's an expression of grief. And so don't feel like you must hide that from them. If it's how you feel, they're going to be able to connect with that probably even better than you expect, because that's how they're feeling.
Yeah. And I think also, a loss of if you truly respect and love your pet, your furry pal, and we talked earlier about the difference of feeling emotionally between losing a loss of a loved one, a human, versus a pet. I think the one thing is, with the human, you have that ability to communicate and express before it happens, and they are able to comfort you many
Yes.
times. A dog, you don't know, and then it is up to you, like you say, that sometimes, is it the time to euthanize because I see something, or is it something else? Or do I prolong this pain and agony because I want to keep loving? It's such a
Yeah.
difficult decision, but
It is really a difficult decision, and I've had to work very closely with my vet, especially for our first dog when I just didn't, you don't want to do it too soon, but you don't want to be
right.
selfish. And I remember calling and talking and saying, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know how long to let this go on." And they offered to me to keep on a calendar each day, at the end of the day, put a smiley face or a sad face. Was it a good day in the life of the dog, or was it a sad day or a bad day or a difficult day in the life of the dog? And I got to tell you, that tip was very instrumental because I could see within a matter of weeks just how quickly the decline was happening. And so I found that to be a very useful tool. But you're right. It isn't, there are situations in which they just become ill and they're done. But more frequently, it's a slow process.
Yeah. I still really want to talk about the grieving and about your book and stuff like that, but I'd like to continue a little bit about this as far as emotions and feelings and how people deal with the loss and why they choose to get a dog and let the dog go. And part of the thing I think is, again, we touched on, oh, I'm lonely today. So they get something without thinking about the future because they think it's just going to comfort me for this period. Then I could return it, get rid of it, whatever.
Right.
But um, I think now I'm kind of losing my train of thought because I'm now thinking back to my three dogs and I've got my other one over here.
Yeah.
But
Well, Chuck, it was really interesting during COVID because our kennels were cleared as COVID came, and people were starting to work from home and they wanted that work partner or whatever the case is. Unfortunately, to your point, once COVID lifted, right, you had a year's worth of dogs at whatever stage they were that then weren't as convenient for people. And so then
yeah.
the kennels filled up again, which was sad. I will say though, between letting a dog run wild and bringing it into the shelter, it is absolutely a responsible thing to do to bring it in, and let the community, right, be able to foster and or care for that animal going forward, rather than expect they're going to make it on their own because oftentimes they won't. They can't.
I like that word fostering, because a lot of people don't. I still think a lot of people do not consider fostering. They're that immediate, I want because I'm lonely. Well, don't get to get because your chances are likely it's going to be like a divorce. At least 50% of them are going to go back. Foster doesn't mean it's permanent. You
Right.
foster, you're helping the fostering organization, you're helping the animal, the pet.
Absolutely.
And you are also filling that void that you feel that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And often fostering is for just a time, right? Whatever the length of
Yeah.
time is that that animal needs care or recovery, depending on if they needed surgery or whatnot. And it's funny, we joke, we call them foster fails when they turn into adoptions because now you've fallen in love with this animal. And it's a beautiful thing. But there are people who and families that will simply foster one after another and take on like puppies or kittens or whatever it may be, until they're old enough to then be adopted out safely. So fostering is just an amazing work. If that is something that someone finds in their heart that they can volunteer to do, that is just, a huge resource for shelters.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to foster not many, four dogs, but they were just the cutest and I just fell in love with them. But as much as I personally wanted, I knew I couldn't because I knew my boundaries. I had my dog, but to see the dogs being adopted by someone who really look like they care for him, who could do the
Yes.
job, and who say they're committed. And I
Right.
know some people recently read and heard that they complain, why do I need to fill out all this paperwork for adopting just a dog? Well, we want to know that you really want the pet.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And some places are more involved than others. We rescued an Airedale from an Airedale rescue, and I'm telling you, there was like up to 20 pages of paperwork. I'm like, this is insane. Why don't you just come over and take a look at our house, for gosh sakes? So yes, there it is very involved, and it's for a purpose. They want to make sure that it's going to a home that's, not only sufficient from an emotional and delivering standpoint, physical standpoint, but that you've got the fencing that's appropriate. You might not anticipate that this dog can hop that fence and be gone, but they'd be able to give you that guidance in advance of the adoption. So there's absolutely good grounding for that.
Well, the big word on this too for me is responsibility.
Yes.
You are responsible for your furry pal, and that furry pal, whether it's 6 months old, 6 years old, or 16 years old, is always going to be a 2 year old equivalent to a child to me, a
Right.
human.
Right.
Can't open the door, can't flush the toilet, can't
Right.
open the refrigerator.
Yes.
You have to be responsible all the
Right.
time.
Right. Absolutely.
Um, so, as far as in your book, you know, the 21 ways, can you give us two? We don't want to spoil everything in the
Sure.
book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you what really got this rolling for me. Last November, our Airedale passed away, and we had been on a streak of 4 years at that point with not having lost a dog. And it just tumbled me over again. You know, when you get on that winning streak and you have, this length of time, and she was, we talk about the dynamics, the family dynamics, and who does that impact? She was my husband's dog. I'll use air quotes, right? My husband's dog. And so this shouldn't be such a big deal to me, but that's silly. She was my dog as much as she was anyone else's. And we went on long walks together, and we just, loved our time together. And what I really appreciated about her was, for my three little dogs, she was a great big sister. I mean, she just did so much for that whole clan. And so, when I finally got my arms around why are you so sad, I decided a eulogy would be appropriate. And I'd never done that before for a dog, but there were a lot of people on Facebook who knew about her cancer. She had cancer in her leg and it progressed up to her stomach. She was a good old age for an Airedale. She was almost 13, and we couldn't surgically remove any of it. So it was just taking its toll. And doing the eulogy really helped me praise all the qualities that we loved about her. She was a goofy, silly girl, and a true member of the family. And it allowed me not only to get out all those great things, and eulogy, if you look back at the word, means high praise. And so to be able to offer that high praise on her behalf, and we often think of it for people, but we don't think about it for dogs. And why not? Because they're deserving of it too. When I put it up on Facebook, it allowed me to share the news without having to go directly to all of those people and tell them the story and feel sad about it all over again. And they appreciated knowing. So a eulogy is a really good thing. There are other written ways that you can do it. So, telling the story around the table, but then writing it down, even just having a jar where you put in fond memories. And then if you're feeling sad, you can reach into the jar and remember it. You can do a collage of pictures. If you've had this animal from puppy or kitten all the way through to an adult dog, you can do the collage every year, a different picture to see how they progressed in age. So there's a lot of things. One thing I would offer to people to keep in mind is that everyone's going to do this differently. Everyone's going to grieve
Yeah.
differently. And I'll use my husband and I as an example. My first dog. So we came to the relationship together with each having a dog. Mine was a blind pug. And so we were very mindful about not moving the furniture around and not putting things in his way. The shoes stayed by the door so he didn't trip over them. Well, the day after he died, my husband and I were coming back from the gym, and he walked from the garage to the kitchen sink to get a drink of water and dropped his duffel bag right in the middle of the floor. And I was deeply offended by that. And I went, really? You're going to do that? Why? It's going to crash right into that. And he turned around and looked at me, like, the dog is died. And I was just distraught. I didn't want things to change that quickly. And he came
Yeah.
over and hugged me and he said, "That's how it's going to be, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, that's how it's going to be." And he said, "So his dog bowls are staying on the mat?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "His toys are staying in the corner?" And I went, "Yep." And he said, "And his harness?" And I went, "Yep." So he would have put all those things away, and that would have helped ease his pain. He didn't want to see those things, but I did. To have those things put away would have hurt my heart even more not to see his presence in the house. And so after a time, I did bundle up those things, but it was a slow process for me. And you just need to appreciate that different people are going to take it a different way. And none of it's wrong. None of it's wrong. It's just a matter of understanding where they come from and how grieving is going to look for them.
Yeah. I kind of want to add to that as far as, we talked about the grieving process as well as filling a void. I'd hate for people to somehow think that because you lost one that you need to fill that gap and you immediately go out and get one. Don't think that you have to. And if you have that feeling, wait on it. You
Sure.
know, there's always going to be plenty of dogs to adopt.
Yes.
Wait,
Yes.
because you don't want to take return.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Very
uh,
true.
uh,
Very true.
um, you know, about adoptions and things like that, and having so many pets out there, so many dogs. I have, and I kind of forewarned you at the beginning. I have a beef to pick with a lot of people out there, and there are people I even know.
Yes.
And I don't know how you feel about this. I two things about it because it's both sides. I don't care for puppy mills and I don't care for people who shop for designer dog. And what I mean by that is they say, oh, I have to have this with that. And then they'll find a breeder who will go out and breed for that purpose. And then all that is a cash dog, cash cow for those breeders thinking, okay, this is the next breed thing mix. There are too many, way too many dogs out there that are in need. Not only
Yes.
that, the second thing, and I commend you and I say thank you very much, is that don't just look for a puppy. There are, again, too many older dogs.
Yes.
Um, I'm not saying old, I'm just saying older dogs
Right. Right.
who, couple things. Some of those older dogs have already been potty trained. They already behave well. They already know those things. You you don't have to go through a lot of that stuff. So
Right.
that's easier. They will give you just as much, if not more love than that darn little cute puppy.
Right. They're good dogs. They're absolutely good dogs. And honestly, the puppy stage is just, it's something, right? I mean, if you've got the
Yeah.
patience for it, good for you. The teething and the potty training and all that are just not, I'm not interested. Our dogs come in, they find the nearest comfy bed and tell, look at me with eyes that say, let me know when dinner is, that's what we've got going on. But you're right. I mean, they've got, some of them have lots of years ahead. Now, I've never had a Chihuahua before Reggie, and we've got Reggie now. We adopted him when he was 10 years old. Okay, 10 years. You don't think, I didn't think that would have such an extended life. He is 18 years old. He's going to be 19 in July. I know. And we got blood work done a couple of months ago, and the vet said he's going to outlive us all. He very well may. So you don't know. And he's still living a great life. It's not like, you would think at 18 years old, he's doing fine. And so it's just a matter of, yes, consider what you need. I guess I'm with you, Chuck. I'm not a designer dog kind of person, just because I've seen what the shelters hold, right?
Yeah.
They're good dogs. And by that I mean they're family oriented. They're just want some love. There are some that are for great active lifestyles. If you like walking and you like hiking, get a dog that can do that for you. If you just want something that will walk to the mailbox with you and hang out on the couch while you watch TV, there are dogs that are good for that too. So, consider your breed, but then check out your local shelters, because I'll tell you, people said I would never find a pug at the shelter, and I've had 4 from the shelter. So they're absolutely there. They're absolutely
Uh,
there.
They are. And like, we're talking about designer dogs. That's a specific breed or crossbreed of dogs that we're talking about, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Uh, there are, again, like I said too, plenty of breeds available at your shelters, um, at rescue places, not necessarily just a shelter, the traditional type of shelter, but
Right.
rescue
Right.
organizations. And if you're looking for a specific breed, there are specific breed rescue organizations
Absolutely.
as
For almost
well.
all of them, Great Danes, I know Airedales, Pugs, they are organizations that specifically will only have that breed of dog for you to be able to rescue. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I kind of like what you're saying earlier too, just now about the way I'll put it is select a dog that's going to fit your lifestyle. Don't think that you want a Great Dane because you want a giant lap dog and you live in an apartment and you like to watch TV and play video games all day, that may not be the best situation.
Right.
Or you might say, well, I'll get a little dog. I will get a Jack Russell Terrier. Well, that dog is going to be just as active and need as much space to run as that Great Dane. So you
Yes,
really have to know the breed and yourself and just be
absolutely.
honest about things like that.
Yes, and be open to it. You know, you might not think, and it's so funny because people are like, "How'd you end up with a pug?" And I'm like, they do pick you. I mean, there is something about that too, you know, and I had visited expecting I wanted a boxer. That's what I thought I wanted when I went there. And I met this pug and I'm like, okay, I spent 2 minutes with him and I was just in love. So it's just, you know, it is a matter of having a sense of how much space do you have? How much time do you have? What kind of energy level do you need? And then considering what that size and breed of dog will do. Because you're right, Jack Russell's really cute, but I'll tell you, they'll run circles around a whole farmyard. You better be careful what you get. But that's the whole point, right? That's what they were bred to do, and that's their job. So yes, be considerate of what the dog was bred to do, and what drives them, what makes them feel good.
Yeah. Well, not only do you have your latest book, but you do have other books too. And I think there's one that talks about what adoption and
Yes.
everything.
Yeah, so Twisty and True Tales of a Shelter Dog Matchmaker. It's 12 short stories about dogs that took the winding road instead of the straight path to happiness. So it's about my experience at the Humane Society and watching those connections happen where you didn't necessarily expect them to. And they're about the adopted dogs in my life too. So very heartwarming if you like stories like that.
And all these are available where?
They're available on Amazon, and you can find out those links and more information about me at dogauthor.com. So it's dog, D-O-G, author, AUTHOR.com.
We'll make sure we have all that information in the show notes. Now, I also would like to ask you, as far as, you know, owning pets and things like that, insurance, food. I know
Yeah,
I'm getting sidetracked on this, but I
sure.
think
No,
all this is very important on the longevity of your dog
sure.
because, again, I don't think I mentioned it earlier. And a lot of times people will unfortunately euthanize a dog because they're going, oh, it's going to cost me $100 to get that fixed or whatever it might be, or 1,000. They're like,
Sure.
it's just a dog,
Yeah.
not worth it. Um,
Well, you know, and it's tough. It's, you know, we see a lot of things at the shelter. So, size of dog, very a big consideration. Smaller shelters will try and move the larger dogs out sooner. And by that, I mean transport them. So I was a transport partner too that would bring dogs from other shelters because if they're too big, they either don't have the space to accommodate them or can't afford the food for them. So there's that. But also, when you look at the specific needs of a dog, whether it be vet bills, and of course, as they age, right, it's tough. I say we like our dogs to be older, and if they don't need arthritis medication, we're not interested. There's an expense to that, right? So you have to be able to consider that. But we have seen also dogs dropped off at the shelter because someone can't afford the surgery that they may need or something like that. It's a true issue, and it's a hard issue to deal with. But certainly you want that dog to have the experience of being able to live a full life versus be euthanized because unless it's, you know, clearly a health issue that can't be remedied. But yeah, there are a lot of things to consider. It's not an easy responsibility. I don't want people to think like, oh, this is just too overwhelming. Dogs are a joy. They bring so much to our lives. They make us laugh. They know how we're feeling. They can cheer us up when we're feeling badly. For me, it's been a lifelong love affair that I hope continues. And I can't say that it hasn't been not a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it is absolutely worth it, as I'm sure you'd attest, Chuck. It's just worth it.
it's worth every moment and every penny,
Yeah.
every dollar that you put into it. I I know I'm sometimes it just really gets to me when again people just treat our dogs, our pals as just an object to fulfill our short-term desires of whatever it might be.
Right.
And I'm gonna go on. I I'm not a psychiatrist, counselor, or a dog, you know, emotional counseling expert or anything, but I have this feeling that a lot of times people get puppies not only because they're cute, but because they want to be able to control, create, and mold. It's
Mm,
a project.
okay.
But then when that project is finished, I've lost my interest. You
Mm,
know, I only say that because I've seen, I won't call them friends. I'll just
sure.
say people who have done that. They have so much joy and love and get the little dog, the puppy, and you know, is growing up and oh, I trained it to do this, I trained it to do that. 18 months later, I'm really not talking much about the dog. Where's the dog? Oh, at home.
Mm, yeah,
it's I'm done training it. It's grown up. It's 18 years old. It's out on its own.
yeah,
It's not that, like we said earlier, and I was saying
right.
it's forever a 2 year old.
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
there's a lot you can do with that dog, I mean, it's a shame to hear that because most of them make great road trip partners, right? They'll go.
Oh yeah.
And there has been so much opened up now too, as far as welcoming dogs into restaurants and, the outdoor areas and hotels and things like that. So, it just depends. I understand that that's not for everyone, but it's also quite an adventure to be able to take your dog on vacation because we can. So why not?
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's another layer of how they can interact and be a part of your life. So yes, I hear you. I don't know how I would feel. I hope there was always a dog under our roof because that's to me the sign of a happy home. But yeah, I know not everybody takes that responsibility that seriously. And it's interesting to me, people who consider themselves cat people versus dog people. The cats like to interact, but more on their terms, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
simply, easier in the way as far as taking care of themselves when you're gone and everything. You really do need to consider that too. Cats do act a bit more independently. Certainly, they still need
Yes.
care, but dogs rely on us for engagement and enrichment.
Oh, they do. And again, like we keep on saying, they give you endless joy,
Yes.
a lifelong commitment they give you, and it's unconditional.
Yeah, it
Where
really
else
is.
can we find unconditional love?
Absolutely. Exactly. I have never met somebody more excited to see me when I come home than my dogs, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Your kindergartner child is going to grow up and you may love them. They may love you, but boy, they can sure talk back to you.
Right. And the dogs can too. Let's be fair. The dogs can talk back, but they're
They,
always adorable and they're talking back.
yeah. Oh, is there? We did touch on this, but I want to ask you directly, and this goes towards adoption.
Yeah.
How do we and when do we decide to adopt?
Yeah. I think that's an individual preference as well. It's really, we have a dynamic of three dogs. We had a situation in which we were fostering, and the situation was the dog could not then, after a couple of months, be adopted out, and so we kept him. So that put us at four. That was a lot for us. I don't think we'll do
Yeah.
that again. But where is your threshold? What is it? It's some For the longest time, I was a one dog household because that's what I independently could, coordinate. People like to have two dogs, and when you look at the personality and the demeanor of the second dog, sometimes when one passes away, then they're lonely, right? And so how do you
Yeah.
rectify that? So it's really a family, I think, a household dynamic. People have run into struggles financially where they've had to move from a house to an apartment. Can that apartment accommodate a dog, let alone two, right? You explained the size of the dog when you're living. You can't have a Great Dane in a 500-foot space. So it's just, I think it's an individual preference. Yeah, and it's hard to say. I would prefer not to ever be without one, but your guidance to pause, consider, take a breath, think through it is absolutely solid. You have to know that you're willing to make that commitment for whatever length of time it may be. And don't adopt a 10-year-old dog thinking he's just going to live a couple years because he might live 8 or 9 or 10 more.
Well, I'll say I attribute that to your love and caring. and health and nutrition
It is.
for
Yeah.
dogs, because that's important too.
Yes.
Which to me means don't don't give it that sodium laced,
Right.
table food that you have, or you think, oh, I'm going to give the steak because it's good for the dog, but you've already seasoned it with so much
Right.
salt and stuff like that,
Yes.
or you're going to give it hot dog. All this, it's just
Yeah.
bad for the dogs.
Right. You got to be mindful. I know people like to spoil them and do table food. We don't do table food.
Yeah.
It's just because of that reason. And they everybody gets daily exercise. So for us, for humans, it's true that you need regular exercise. It's true for your pets too. And although cats will entertain themselves and get exercise, dogs not so much. They're going to follow your lead. So if you can, and it's important too that as they age, you be mindful. We used to go for a lot longer walks than we do now because they were younger. They could move easier.
Mm.
Now, right, we have to tailor that down a little bit because it's more of a sniffing walk, we call it. We're going to go smell the flowers for a few minutes and then we're going to come back because, and don't underestimate how good that is for a dog. Their olfactory system and being able to sniff things burns calories and engages their mind so effectively. It is as good as a long walk, standing and sniffing something. So let them do that. It's what they do best, and it's very good for them.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that if you're able to, I would say look at getting pet insurance. You might say, well, heck, it's $20 a month. I don't want to do that, or 40, or whatever it might be, but it may be better than the $20,000, you know, vet bill that you might
Right. Yeah. You really have to
require.
balance those expenses. If you are getting a younger dog, a lot more is going to be covered by those insurances because simply, like people too, they'll consider some things pre-existing conditions. So you need to be mindful about what their age is and what their physical health is in advance of that so that you really have a good understanding of what that insurance will cover.
Yeah. Well, Gene, is there anything else that you want to add to, as far as, we talked a whole lot, and this main thing was supposed to be about grieving, grief, and
Yes.
how to handle it, but we covered so much, which I felt was important, and I think that the audience would appreciate and has appreciated what we've talked about, because
Absolutely. We covered a lot of ground. And I'd say again, to consider when you lose a pet the grieving process because if you don't go through it, it's going to be very hard to come back around and be able to adopt another dog or a cat or an animal. If you don't grieve, it's just going to sit. It's going to sit and become worse. And you don't want that. You want to be able to be happy moving forward and being able to adopt and love again and to be able to open your heart to another animal. So consider that it is real, it is valid, and it does take time.
yeah. Oh, Gene Ferrari, 21 Ways to Weather the Loss of Your Pet. That is your latest book that we're talking about, but there are other books available. So, folks, I'll make sure that I have all the notes in the show notes. And remember, if you're a responsible pet owner, have your pets spayed or neutered. Gene, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.